Hi, everybody, and welcome to the second part of our discussion on conference. So we decided we'd break this into two. So watch our previous one where we talked about our favourite talks and about what was the positive messages and things. We thought we would separate them out. We're going to start with President Oakes. So would you like to talk about his talk and the proclamation on the family and how all this impacts us as singles?
Yeah, and I would like to start just by, it was the last talk, so you're, at least I am like so spiritually really overwhelmed, like processing all of the amazing talks and having listened to them. And so I think my emotions are always a little higher at the end anyway, just because I have a little bit of that overwhelm. But I felt like his talk was so incredibly powerful and meaningful, but it also just kind of was like a stab in the heart to me. It really made me sad because I often, and even when I'm in this is one of the biggest challenges, even when I'm in the temple, is that I'm always thinking about my posterity. And, all of that kind of gets disrupted when you're in a home where, you have a divorced family. I don't know, maybe not so much if you're a widow, but definitely for those that have experienced a divorce. So that really hit me hard, I guess I would say. I don't know. How did you guys feel, or what did you think?
I always find talks about the proclamation of the family difficult in a variety of ways. One, I have a gay daughter, and so I've had to do quite a bit of like, how does this fit into, my eternal family? And I've done tons and tons and tons of like research and coming to terms and understanding. And the Christopherson family has been a big part of helping me with that. But accepting that our job is to love, I think, is a really important part. But the proclamation of the family, when you're not sealed, when you've got people, all of my children are inactive, it's hard to listen to. And, you feel like you did all the right things. You did the stuff that everybody, I was the stay-at-home mum and I looked after my kids. And so you're sort of like, well, and so I think the recognition that some of this stuff to hear is hard is probably what we want to say.
I'll share something that I felt during that talk when I realized the direction that, because here we are, like Kim was saying, it's the end of conference. So we know that President Oakes is about to talk, and, he's a powerful speaker and he doesn't mince words. What's he going to say? And then, and he beautifully shares that this talk was written beforehand, right? And then it's a powerful talk on the family, and that exaltation comes through the family, and just over and over sharing the importance of family and a mother, father, children. And it was powerful, but it kind of started to, looking from a singles lens. It's like, what does this look like? And what does this mean for me? What does this mean for us? And I instantly remembered a talk from 2008. It was actually not a talk. It was the Worldwide Leadership Training Meeting from 2008. And Elder Holland gave a powerful, powerful teaching principle on patterns. And so I just want to read what he said about patterns, because he was talking about families and he was talking about the proclamation on the family. And what he said is, we know that others in our audience and in the church are not now married, nor do some have an intact family fitting the ideal we regularly refer to in the church. Please be assured we are fully aware of the many different circumstances that exist among our members. We love every one of you. We also realize that as more and more families are in disarray, and as many cultural forces devalue marriage, children, and traditional family life, the general authorities and general officers of the church feel increased urgency to speak of ideals and gospel-centered principles. And then he goes on to share this example of his mother making a pattern, a shirt, and how it was really important that she use a perfect pattern to copy this shirt. Otherwise, it would have, been a big mess. And he talks about patterns and using a perfect pattern. And then to follow up, he says, after this example, I hope this helps you understand why we talk about the pattern, the ideal of marriage and family, when we know full well that not everyone now lives in that ideal circumstance. It is precisely because many don't, or perhaps never have even seen that ideal, and because some cultural forces steadily move us away from that ideal, that we speak about what our Father in heaven wishes for us in his eternal plan for his children. Individual adaptations have to be made as marital status and family circumstances differ. But all of us can agree on the pattern as it comes from God, and we can strive for its realization the best way we can. And I remembered that, and I looked it up, and I thought that is what President Oaks is doing. He's not unaware that there is a growing proportionate amount of singles in the church. He is trying to help us come back to the pattern, to turn to our covenants, and to rely on the promises of the Lord, that the family is important, and that, yeah, we're suffering. I want to be married. But it's not a reality for a lot of us, but the pattern is perfect.
Yeah.
Sariah, that really resonates with me too. And I struggle with just some of the feeling of, loss as I went through President Oak's talk as well, because he talked about all these, things, family traditions and other things that are really healthy and working together as a family. And I'm an empty nester and I'm divorced. And so it's like all those good days when I was married and the 4 kids running around the house, that's no longer there, and it's painful to feel it gone. And so there's a feeling of loss, and yet at the same time, the pattern is, the true pattern, because that's the pattern that actually brings us the most joy. And so of course that's what God would want for us, but because of our circumstances and mortality, there's chapters of our life where we don't have that pattern, and may not until the next life. But the beautiful thing is that we are promised over and over and over, if we keep our covenants, we will not have any blessing withheld, including family in the eternities. And so that's really comforting. And also to know that these leading brethren and prophets, they don't have perfect families either, and they have challenges. President Nelson had 2 of his children have gone through divorces and remarried. And of course, like we said, Elder Holland is now a widower. And so we have challenges. Nobody's exempt from these challenges. And we see that in the very top leading councils of the church.
Yeah. And I thought it was really beautiful because you don't really see President Oaks isn't typically showing his very vulnerable side, but in this particular talk, he started out with that story and really illustrating that he grew up with a single mom. And so and I think that's probably one of the reasons I have such a strong testimony of the family proclamation, is because my life was the antithesis of that. And so I know what it feels like to not have that. And I think it was important that he started out with that story, and just recognizing that maybe that's where his foundational kind of, this is why this is so important. I mean, he was blessed, at least he wasn't in a divorced family, because I think there are a lot of dynamics when you're in a divorced family that come into play, because I grew up in a divorced family, right? I was just sharing with a friend the other day, and it really hit me when they talked about traditions. I grew up in a home where my mom really wasn't that focused on tradition. It was very kind of chaotic, and she was busy. So she wasn't working hard to gel us as a family or any of those things. But on my dad's side, those traditions were really important. But I was telling a friend that every Sunday night that I was at my dad's house, so every other weekend when I would go to see my dad, we had a tradition. We had a big, beautiful family meal. We usually watched Disney because it was on at 7 o'clock on Sunday nights, and then we would play games. And my stepmom would always make like a beautiful, she is Danish, so she always had a delicious dessert or like a Danish pastry or whatever that had been cooking or while we were all playing games or whatever. But that was our tradition. And oftentimes I would cry to have to go home to my mom's house. But those traditions, that's what sticks with you as a kid, is all those traditions. And I don't think there's anything, even though we're in a single community, preventing us from creating those traditions for our families, even if they're long gone. I've worked hard to instill new traditions with my new little family to help instill some of those things, like at least around the holidays, but maybe not even around the holidays, maybe more culturally focused. Or I just think tradition is a really important aspect, and that as singles, we don't have to miss out on some of that stuff. We just have to work harder at how we create it and recognize that it's going to be different than what it used to be. I don't know what you guys' thoughts are, but
right.
I think
agree,
that sounds
Kim.
like a podcast, Kim. That sounds like it goes around.
Yes, it does. That's a great idea. I have a podcast about how we can make traditions as singles and not feel like we're boxed into, if we don't have a, dual parent household, that we can't have traditions. I don't know if a lot of people know, but I mean, I was so touched by his vulnerability, right? And his sharing that personal experience about his grandfather. His mother, there was a Church News article back in August of 2022 where he talks about that experience when his dad died, and his mother actually had a nervous breakdown. And it's kind of a little bit of an unknown, interesting thing. And I'll just read this. After my father died, this is him speaking, my mother went back to the university to get her master's degree to be a better qualified breadwinner. But she went back too soon, and being separated from her children and having lost her husband, she suffered a very serious nervous breakdown and was not functional. She had to drop out of school. She actually, in a different party, talks about how she had to receive intense mental care and professional doctor help. She ultimately returned and got her degree. But as she had to drop out of school and dropped out of parenting and be cared for by professionals, and she was told she would probably never be able to function again. And so then he says, I was almost immediately an orphan, separated from my mother, sorry, and my father's death. I was raised by my grandparents. That's intense. He witnessed his mother, his single mother, having a nervous breakdown that was really intense. Anyway, and then seeing his vulnerability, and like I've been through parts of my divorce where it was, I mean, I had some nervous breakdowns. Like it was becoming single when you were not single, and the effects of that can really put you in dark places, especially women who become single mothers and feel the panic of providing is so intense. I resonate with that, Kim, how difficult that is, but he understands that. And that is really powerful to me. I know he's speaking from a place where he understands.
Yeah. And I think we just can't miss the importance of, like you said, the pattern, and it is the ideal. We all recognize that, but as close as we can, we should all be, even in our single environments, be striving to create as much of that, and that in that setting as we can. And one of the things that did also hit me hard is that I'm in Arizona, my kids are all in Utah. And so we don't have that place that they can always come and gather together and spend time as a family. I have to really work, I usually will rent an Airbnb and will have them all come and share time with me. But those things are hard on me. Like it's important to me to potentially have a home in Utah and one here, or a place where we can all be together, because those things, those family get-togethers and reunions and things. And even if you listen to the tributes of President Nelson's talk, he got together with his family every month, a huge family. And so I think all those things where you get together start to seem to be dissolving in the world that we live in today, and that we do really need to re-emphasize those things and spending time with each other.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, it's a bit unrealistic. Like, I've got 8 children, which means that and I've got 15 grandchildren. Like, I don't imagine too many people have a house that could cope with that.
Support that, yeah.
Yeah. So, and as a single person, I sold my big family home because, most of the time it's just really lonely sitting in a great big house by yourself. So yeah. We do some of we talk about hiring an Airbnb. We did that last holidays. For us, that's in January. But yeah, and we're talking about doing it again. But yeah, it's not realistic. Like, we're in a different phase of life now, where maybe that's not something that we can have, but
we just have to figure out new ways, like I said, new traditions, new ways, but don't give up on the idea of all getting together. Or like even my parents, they used to have second Sundays, and now where every second Sunday all my siblings, all 6, and their kids' kids, we would all get together for dinner. And their house is not big enough to support all those kids. And it's hard on my parents in their 80s now to be able to pull that off. So we just have to think of new ways and new things that we can do, but don't give up, I think, on the idea of spending time together and finding those.
Okay. So go on.
I guess I want to say, because Troy and Juan, like, how does that hit home with the men in the single community as far as the family proclamation and disrupting? I know you spoke to it a little bit, Troy. I don't know, Juan, if you have thoughts on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that what hurts the most, through a divorce is not so much not being with the spouse, but it's the separation of the family unit,
Yeah, the loss of the family unit.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Because, you can meet someone else and that does it. But I think you're always going to have that void, of when you had children, that separation. And so, yeah, every time I hear about the family proclamation, he hits hard, like he touches a very sensitive part within me. Because, yeah, I had the opportunity to remarry earlier, and have more children. And maybe that could have helped, but, I don't know. But that's not the case now. So it's challenging. But again, we have a God that he doesn't think more in mortal terms. It's all eternity before him. And he has a plan for all of us, We just gotta hang on and keep seeking that intimacy with him, and then just trust him in the development of our lives that we still have to explore and experience. So, that's how I see it.
Thanks.
Can I?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Juan, I was just going to say really quick, just exactly what you were saying. There's a quote in President Oakes's talk where he says, "Of course, many church members have beloved family members who do not embrace gospel values and expectations. Such members need our love and patience in relating to one another, we should remember that the perfection we seek, because we all want this perfect family, right? Everybody around the table, everybody keeping their covenants, everyone going to the temple. We should remember that the perfection we seek is not limited to the stressful circumstances of mortality. The great teaching in the Doctrine and Covenants assures that repentance and spiritual growth can continue in the spirit world that follows mortality. That for us with families that are not, A, they're not whole, intact families anymore, and B, many of us have family members who have left the covenant path. Like that is, he's speaking to us right there.
Yeah, and that, I mean, going back to what I was saying earlier, that's humanizing God. His plan, we're just transitioning. We're not really, this is not our home. This is not our destination. And things have been tough. Things have been challenging, but I'm looking forward to the manifestation of those promises of that eternal God. That's what I'm looking forward to, try to live with as much faith as I can, and be as closer as I can be, love my children, try to be the most present dad I can be, because that's my calling, as far as being a father to these children, and just embrace that promise, that we will.
And your kids are still young, so you have a 10 and a 16-year-old, right?
Yeah.
So I think the rest of us are all, Sariah, do you have high school age or no?
I have a 14-year-old.
Yeah. So.
But the rest are
older. Yeah.
So yes, so Juan, for you, this is like that we were talking about before about the parenting of your children, but you only get to see them, once every 2 weeks, or, the traditions, and it's a bigger impact when you only see them occasionally.
Yeah, it is, especially because I moved to Arizona from New Jersey to here, where, this is where her family is, and her family became my family, and it was wonderful. It was great. So not being part of that, it's been challenging, but I have encouraged it for my kids, making sure that they still explore that family and growing up with their cousins and everybody.
Because you don't have any family
I
here.
don't. And all my family's back east, but still they're very dysfunctional. So, I've been in this journey quite a bit by myself, with God, obviously, and, good friends like him and you guys. And that's when that single community comes into play, and being such a support. We all cry together, but we also strengthen each other, and that's cool, and, opportunities present themselves, and we just carry on, and I don't know, just trust God. That's all we can do. And I love life.
I know for me, that promise that Sariah was talking about, that, that we will do the best we can in this life, because in the next life we're promised that ideal, that dream is still in our life and still coming, just because we don't have it right this very second.
And we don't know the details, obviously, how this is going to work out. We don't, but we cling so much to the idea. Our imagination is great, but still very limited. I think what God has for us is.
Yeah. There is that promise, isn't it, that the next life is better than we can imagine. And I always say, well, I can imagine pretty good. So if it's better than I can imagine, that's
no. Yeah, seriously, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing.
Because I've got an imagination, and I can imagine like a great life. So, all right. So any other thoughts about President Oaks? I think there's been a few talks about we've seen him as an apostle, and it'll be interesting to watch that change. Anybody want to talk about that?
Yeah, like I'll be honest, President Oaks always, he always said things straight out, very strong in his.
Yeah, like Sariah said, he doesn't mix words. He's very
exactly. Direct. The judge, the attorney, driven force. But I definitely saw a different person in this conference. I'm like, that's really interesting, you know? Yeah, just seeing that change is like, huh, very, very interesting. Yeah, like he seemed so soft and so caring and so just humble, and yeah, I want to see more of that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think everybody, I think a lot of people, in one way or another, have not, connected to him as much, and so I think, I think we've seen some change that is definitely something special.
So I guess that's what we want to say to the single community. Stay tuned, because you'll be a very different person. And
Yeah.
I know it's hard when we've, had a President Nelson that we've all just loved. You just could feel his love. And I actually went to a conference where he spoke once. I guess you guys get to see him a bit more often, but I literally got to see him once from high up in the stands. And as he walks out, he sort of waves, and I could feel, it was like he could wave to me, thousands of people, and yet I felt it. And I felt that with his talks. I felt like he understood and loved and stuff. So it's very sad to say goodbye to that, because that message of love was so beautiful. But stay tuned.
Well, and I guess I want to touch too on just the talk, and really being willing to look at his talk and say, as a single, how can I apply some of this, even though we don't have the perfect thing. Like I said, he talks about creating traditions and shared sacred experiences. We will only rob ourselves of that. You know what I mean? So look at that talk and really maybe with an open mind and say, how can I create those things, even though I'm in this stage of my life where I'm alone? And what are maybe even little small things like, and also I think one of my biggest blessings is my watching my middle son as a priesthood holder, and in my mind, he had being willing to maybe let him be that for our family in certain settings and in ways. So thinking about your kids as they become young adults, and how we can embrace those things and know that maybe it's okay if he's the priesthood holder in our little family right now. And so I think we have to think about things maybe differently.
But Troy, I think you've got something to say there.
I'm just deep in thought about the whole podcast, and I was thinking about maybe even a little earlier segment about just how contrast is such a great teacher, and what we're seeing in a couple of things, both with the family proclamation in my own life of being married. I had a very happy marriage for a long time, and then becoming single and divorced. The contrast and how the family proclamation is really it's doubly, like, I have double the strength of my testimony in the family proclamation than I did before, because I now see this contrast, and what it's like without having some of the things I did have, where the proclamation taught. I was closer to the ideal, and now I'm further from the ideal. And now I see the contrast, and it makes me want the ideal even more than ever, and makes me realize how true the prophetic statements are in that proclamation. So I have it. It's a burning fire that this is a true proclamation. And then second, what we were talking about with President Oaks, that I am grateful for his leadership and his teachings on the family. And I'm grateful he's willing to have the courage to speak the truth, and the truthful principles, like Sariah said, establish the pattern, the true pattern, the ideal pattern, and say it even though it is painful. And he knows it's painful for us. When we hear some of these things, I know he knows it's painful, but he is speaking with courage. because it's truth, and truth from God will bless us, even though there's a struggle with it sometimes because we don't have what we want. And so it's an interesting situation working through a true prophet. He's not a prophet yet, but the president of the Quorum of the 12 speaking as he is, and then also feeling hurt from an address that's also true is an interesting set of circumstances.
And so what do you do with that hurt part of you? How does that?
That for me, I internalized that hurt and was just like, I'm going to go doubly hard, and I want to go get remarried to a faithful woman and go at it again and do better this time, and try for the ideal as much as I can. And that it motivates me to do that even more. At the same time, I also realize that it's not all up to me, because I have posterity, and like I can only control what my choices are, and then everybody else has theirs, of course, and that's the plan. That is God's plan. And so just allowing for the fact that it will probably never be perfect in this life, but I can at least do my part to try and do that. And what Elder Oak said, have these traditions, do family instead of just consumption, do production. And that really hit me strongly about, like, I want to get our family together and do projects together, and let's go serve together. One of our family traditions was we would go sing for some of these elderly homes, like memory care centers, as a family for Christmas. And now that my family's grown and I'm not married, we don't have that tradition, and I miss that. But it's like, well, I can reestablish that in the way that I can. Maybe for now it's with single friends or just with a couple of my kids, but I can still try and like bring some of those back, which fell off a bit with the divorce and with just the circumstances.
Yeah. Or even the counseling as a family, even if it's a regular phone call on a weekly basis, or, who knows how that plays out as we are empty nesters, or we have adult children, or like in my situation, relying more on my children to help in some of those situations. But we can counseling as a family changes as you get adult children, right? But just thinking about things differently, it doesn't mean we can't do it.
Good. Well, thank you, Troy. That's good to feel that testimony about the family proclamation, and the dichotomy of, like, I don't have it, but to still have the strength in the belief in it. And I think Sariah's quote she did a little while ago had that same power to it, didn't it? It was good. All right. So is anybody else?
Just so thankful for our leaders in the church and their continued guidance and direction, and I definitely have a testimony of that.
Yes, we're very lucky to be led by such powerful leaders. It's great to see that we didn't even talk about the women, but some of their talks were powerful as well. And we are so very lucky to have this leadership and this guidance and these talks that we can now read for the next 6 months. I find that's really powerful. I tend to read at least one a week for the next 6 months. And there's a few talks. It was one I went back and reread recently and realized how much I had marked in the talk. And then I marked a whole bunch of other stuff and then went, I've nearly marked the whole talk.
Yeah, they are good. So very thankful for those.
Yeah, some of those will become classics. Well, thank you, everybody, for discussing conference with us, both the good and the more difficult. And
there we go.
And thank you for being part of our podcast today. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Nice job.